everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Nick, and in today's video I want to talk about cohabitation. So cohabitation is definitely one of the hotter topics in the Crestie gecko community. For the most part, I think everybody can agree that it can be done, and I also think for the most part that a lot of people agree that it has to be done properly. So first thing I want to talk about is, why do I cohab? I cohab because I produce Crestie geckos. So when you breed Crestie geckos, you know, you cohab for space purposes. Now with that said, I do have backup enclosures in case something goes wrong, and I keep an eye on my geckos. I write down their weights, I write down when they last laid, I write down how many eggs they laid, I even write down if the eggs were good or bad. So those things that I do to ensure the health of my geckos. But let's talk about, if you wanted to cohab, what are the steps that you need to take? So the first thing, and the biggest part about this, is if you're going to cohab geckos, 1, they need to be adult. 2, they need to be the same size. Whenever you house geckos together as juveniles, you're entering a risk that's much greater, especially if they're not sexed. If you have 2 females that are probably 25-30 grams, and you can confirm that they're female, then those can actually probably be cohab, but they need to be the same size, and you need to be very diligent in making sure that they stay the same size while they're cohab together. As far as juveniles go, the biggest issue that I find is that sometimes, you know, it happens to everybody. They go to a show, or they go to Petco or PetSmart or whatever, and they buy 2 babies and they put them in 1 tank. The reason you get away with that is because they don't become sexually mature. Males can drop as soon as 15 grams, and females don't actually become like sexually reproductive until they're about 40 grams and 2 years old. So if you think about it like that, a male can actually breed around, you know, for me, typically like 8 months or so, 9 months. I mean, somewhere in that range. You know, you get a male that's up to 15, 16 grams. He can already breed, and that female still has a year and a half almost, at least. So that's really kind of a big deal, because now let's say that you buy 2 geckos. You house them together. They each hit about 15 grams. One's a male, one's a female. There's a chance that that male is ready to go, and he might try to mate with her, and then she accepts, because it's not exactly like a choice in the reptile world. And then she gets she becomes fertile, and she starts making eggs. So now what's going to happen is the calcium that she's using to still build up her bones and her body and to make herself bigger and stronger, that actually goes to those eggs. And then what happens is when all that goes to those eggs, and while she's making those eggs, she loses out, and it'll stunt her growth. And honestly, worst case scenario, first of all, the eggs aren't going to be good because it's too much for a little gecko to do. And also there's a chance that she could become egg bound. And what egg bound is that's whenever the egg is actually too big to come out of them, and it gets stuck in their stomach, you know, their ovary system, or however they make the eggs. I don't really know the whole scientific part of it, but and they get stuck in there, and then it can actually kill them. And most of the time, without, you know, intervention from a vet, it probably will kill them. So that's a risk that's really not worth taking. And then the other thing too is when you cohab, you need to make sure that you have spare enclosures. And if you're not really wanting to get into breeding, and you only want 5 or 6, maybe 10, well then maybe just having single tanks is probably the way you want to go. And then that way you can raise them individually. And then when they get to that 40-50 gram mark, and you want to try to cohab them, go for it, because now you know that you've built a solid base. Like, the foundation for those geckos has been set, so you know that they're healthy geckos, and you know you did it right. Whereas when they're cohabbed, it can be a little more difficult to keep an eye on things like that and maintain like a good, I know how much this one's eating, and I know how much this one's eating, and this one gets crickets, and this one gets crickets, you know. It's harder to kind of keep all that in mind whenever you're just kind of keeping them together from a very young age. Now, it can be done. People do it all the time. I still think that if they are separated at a fairly young age, I typically raise mine together until about 7 to 10 grams. I'll separate somewhere in that range. It kind of all just depends on how I think the behavior is. If one becomes bigger than the other, I don't care if it's at 5 grams and one's 3 grams, I'm gonna separate them, because I know that at that point there's a battle for food, and one of them is winning. There's already a dominant gecko established. So, and even with my adults, you know, I do have some pairs that have a smaller male with a female. So I have to be very careful, and I have to watch that male very carefully to make sure that he's not going to lose weight. That's something I feel comfortable doing, so that's why I do it. But in reality, you know, you should not cohab juveniles, and that's kind of the biggest thing. And I get tons of questions on Facebook all the time of people being like, hey, do you think I can house these together? And it's never just as simple as just housing geckos together. There's so many nuances that go into the behaviors, the sizes, the weights, the ages. You know, what is it, male, is it female? Can you properly sex it? If you cannot properly sex it, do not house anything together. You're just kind of gambling at that point, because males will kill each other. And like I said earlier, the male and the female, he can potentially, you know, make her gravid way too early, and that's just not something you want to deal with. So at the end of the day, it may not be worth it for everybody. I know a lot of people want to do it because a lot of people on YouTube even who have crested geckos, they cohab. So like, why wouldn't you cohab, right? But there's just so much that goes into it that it's almost not fair to yourself to start off with a cohab because that's all you see. So that's why I just kind of want to make this quick little video, kind of putting that out there. If you guys have any comments, you guys want to talk about it in the comment section, I'd love to do that. But if not, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And until next time, stay safe and stay positive, guys.